If you want to know whether you're heading toward diabetes, don't wait for a blood test. Go look in the mirror and look at your neck, because your body often flashes a visible warning sign years before your glucose ever reads high. And here's the part that breaks my heart a little. Most people scrub at this sign thinking it's dirt. It isn't. It won't wash off no matter how hard you try. And almost no one is ever told what it actually means. I'm Maren, and over more than 15 years in emergency medicine, I watched diabetes show up out of nowhere, in person after person. Except it was never really out of nowhere. Their bodies had been signaling it for years. The warning was written right there on their skin, and nobody had translated it for them. So stay with me, because I'm going to show you exactly what to look for. The one simple shift that can actually fade this sign by addressing what's causing it, and the 3 or 4 common mistakes that quietly make it worse without you ever realizing. That shift is the key to this whole thing, and I'll get there. Hold on to it. First, I need you to understand something that almost nobody explains properly, because it changes how you see this entirely. Type 2 diabetes does not arrive overnight. It is not a lightning strike. It is the final step of a long, quiet process called insulin resistance. And that process can simmer for years, sometimes more than a decade, while your standard fasting glucose still reads perfectly normal. That's why people are blindsided. They get a clean glucose number at a checkup, they exhale, and they assume all is well. Meanwhile, underneath, the fire is already burning. Let me give you the picture I use with my own patients. Think of insulin as a key. Its job is to unlock your cells so sugar can get out of your blood and into the cells where it's used for energy. Now, with insulin resistance, those locks get stiff. The key doesn't turn as easily anymore. So what does your body do? It doesn't give up, it does the logical thing. It cuts more keys. Your pancreas pumps out more and more insulin to force those stiff doors open. And for a long while, it works. Your blood sugar stays normal because you're flooding the system with insulin to keep it that way. Your glucose test looks fine. But that flood of insulin, that chronically high insulin level, what we call hyperinsulinemia, that is the real early problem. That is the smoldering fire. And it leaves a visible fingerprint on your body long before your sugar ever climbs. And here is where your neck comes in. Because high insulin doesn't just sit quietly in your bloodstream. It literally changes your skin. Here's the sign. When insulin levels stay chronically elevated, that excess insulin starts doing something it was never meant to do. Normally, insulin docks onto its own receptor. But when there's far too much of it circulating, it begins binding to a different doorway, the IGF-1 receptor, the insulin-like growth factor receptor, which sits on the skin cells in your epidermis and the fibroblasts in the layer beneath. Insulin binds those growth factor receptors with extraordinarily high affinity, and when it does, it flips on growth signals. It tells those skin cells to multiply faster than they should. On top of that, all that insulin lowers a binding protein in your liver, which frees up even more IGF-1 to circulate and amplify the effect. The result of all that excess proliferation is a condition called Acanthosis Nigricans. What does it look like? Patches of darkened, velvety, slightly thickened skin. The texture is the giveaway. It can feel a little like soft velvet or fine corduroy. It shows up most often on the back and the sides of the neck, in the armpits, in the groin, and in other skin folds. And I want you to really sit with this analogy because it's the truest thing I can tell you about it. Acanthosis nigricans is the smoke from a fire that's been smoldering inside your metabolism. People rub at it. They scrub it in the shower. They buy whitening creams. They feel embarrassed like they haven't cleaned themselves properly. But it will never wash off because it isn't coming from the outside. It's coming from the inside. And this isn't a fringe finding. In one study of people newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, more than a third had acanthosis nigricans on the back of the neck. And among those with significant obesity, that number climbed past half. In overweight teenagers, having these patches more than doubled the odds of having dangerously high insulin and measurable insulin resistance. Researchers across Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Japan, and the United States have all found the same link, independent of geography. This is one of the most reliable visible clues we have that insulin is running high, and it's been hiding in plain sight on people's necks this whole time. Let me tell you about the kind of case I saw again and again. A man in his early 40s comes into the emergency department for something completely unrelated, a sprained wrist, let's say. He's not heavy, he'd tell you he's basically healthy. But while I'm examining him, I notice it, that dark, velvety band across the back of his neck. I ask him about it, and he says, almost annoyed, "Oh, that, I can never get it clean." And in that one sentence, his body had been trying to warn him for years, and no one had ever stopped to read the message. That's the moment this whole video exists for. So let's get practical. Here's how you check yourself right now. Go to a mirror or use your phone camera. Look at the back of your neck and the sides of your neck. Look in your armpits. You're looking for skin that is darker than the surrounding area, with a velvety or slightly thickened texture, and borders that fade rather than ending sharply, and crucially, that does not scrub away. While you're at it, look for small skin tags clustering in those same areas, on the neck and the armpits especially. Skin tags tend to travel with the same metabolic picture, so a cluster of them in those folds is part of the same story your body is telling. Now, the shift, the one I told you to hold on to. Here it is. The entire root of this sign is too much insulin, so the goal is simple to state. Lower the insulin load on your body. And there are two levers that matter most. The first lever is what's driving insulin up in the first place, and the biggest culprits are liquid sugar and refined carbohydrates. Sugary drinks, soda, sweet coffees, juice, energy drinks are some of the most powerful insulin triggers there are, because the sugar hits your bloodstream fast and unbuffered, and your pancreas answers with a surge. Cutting liquid sugar first, before you change anything else, is often the single highest impact move you can make. The second lever is the one almost nobody talks about, and it's the most empowering, so listen closely. Your muscle is the body's biggest lock fixer. Skeletal muscle is by far the largest site where glucose gets pulled out of your blood, and trained muscle can take up sugar with far less insulin required. When you build and use muscle, you're essentially installing new, smoother locks all over your body, doors that open without your pancreas having to flood the system. More muscle means lower insulin, and lower insulin is exactly what fades the smoke on your neck, because you're finally putting out the fire underneath. That's how this closes the loop. You don't treat the patch, you lower the insulin that's creating it. And you can stack helpers on top of that. Small things I've covered before that all blunt the insulin surge. There's the pre-meal vinegar trick, a tablespoon or two of vinegar in water before a carb-heavy meal. In controlled studies, vinegar meaningfully reduced the glucose and insulin spike after eating, in part by improving how the forearm muscle takes up glucose. There's food order, eating your vegetables, fiber, and protein before the starch on your plate. In research, simply eating the starch last instead of first cut the after-meal glucose spike dramatically and lowered the insulin response substantially. There's daily movement, especially a short walk after meals. And there's protecting your sleep, because short and broken sleep drives insulin resistance all on its own. None of these are magic, but every one of them lowers the insulin tide that's feeding the sign on your skin. Now let me save you from the mistakes I watch people make over and over, because these are the things that quietly keep the fire burning. Mistake number 1, scrubbing, bleaching, or buying creams to lighten the patch. I understand the impulse completely, but this is treating the smoke and ignoring the fire. You can't scrub away a signal that's being generated from the inside by your own insulin. At best, you irritate your skin. At worst, you waste months feeling like you've handled it, while the real process marches on. Mistake number 2, and this one costs people years. Trusting a single, normal fasting glucose. I cannot stress this enough. Fasting glucose is often the last number to break. Your body will burn through enormous amounts of insulin to keep that one number looking pretty, sometimes for a decade, while everything underneath is going wrong. A normal fasting glucose is not the same as a healthy metabolism. If you see this sign, you want to ask your doctor about a hemoglobin A1C, which reflects your average sugar over about 3 months, and ideally a fasting insulin level, which can reveal the high insulin that glucose alone hides. Mistake number 3, cutting fat but keeping the sugary drinks. So many people trying to do the right thing slash the fat in their diet and feel virtuous about it, while still drinking their sugar all day long. Liquid sugar is one of the single biggest insulin drivers you can put in your body. If you only change one thing, change that, not your salad dressing. And mistake number 4, maybe the most dangerous belief of all. I'm not overweight, so I'm fine. Insulin resistance shows up in slim people too. You can carry dangerous fat where you can't see it, wrapped around your liver and your organs, what we call visceral fat, while looking lean in the mirror. Plenty of people I diagnosed were not heavy at all. The sign on the neck doesn't care what the scale says. So if you're slim and you see it, please don't dismiss it. Now I owe you an honesty beat, because you deserve the truth, not just the hook. This sign is a flag to act on. It is not a diagnosis you make on yourself in your bathroom. Darkened, velvety skin on the neck warrants a real workup with a real clinician. That A1C, that fasting insulin, a conversation about your full picture. And in rarer cases, especially when it appears suddenly, spreads quickly, or shows up without any weight or insulin context, Acanthosis nigricans can point to other conditions entirely, including things that need prompt medical attention. So the move is never to self-treat and never to panic. The move is to get it properly checked. Here's the part I most want you to carry with you. Prediabetes is one of the most reversible conditions in all of medicine. This isn't wishful thinking. It's some of the strongest evidence we have. In the landmark Diabetes Prevention Program, a study launched in 1996 with results published in 2002, people at high risk who made structured lifestyle changes, modest weight loss, and about 150 minutes of activity a week cut their risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 58%. In people over 60, it was 71%. And a follow-up a decade later showed they were still meaningfully protected. Meanwhile, the scale of this is staggering. In the United States alone, well over 100 million adults are living with prediabetes, and roughly 8 out of 10 of them have no idea. You do not have to be one of the 8. Genetics may load the gun, but insulin resistance is the trigger, and it's something your daily habits pull back or release every single day. The drink you choose, the muscle you build, the order you eat your food, the sleep you protect. Those are the levers. They're in your hands. So do this now, before you click away. Go check your neck. Check the sides, the back, your armpits. If you find that velvety darkness, don't scrub it. Understand it, and go get the right tests. And if this is the warning you wish someone had handed you years ago, subscribe, so the next signal your body sends doesn't slip by unread. And send this to someone you love who's been calling it just a dark patch. It might be the most important thing you share all year.